Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt and welcome back to another Short War video, and today we have massive news coming out of the Black Sea that Ukraine has successfully struck and destroyed another major Russian Black Sea Fleet vessel, and it is another big win for Ukraine. And we're also hearing and getting word that the US might send ATACMS missiles to Ukraine in just the next week or so if that aid bill gets finalized in time. And finally, we are getting word that the US is strongly considering sending about 60 or so military advisors to Ukraine to put on their territory in a non-military role to help Ukraine basically structure their war effort a little bit more efficiently. But with that, we're jumping into our first article of the day, which goes to Visegrad 24. And in this article, we can see a Ukrainian missile has struck another Russian Black Sea Fleet ship, and the ship is on fire in the docks of Sevastopol in Crimea. And like Visegrad 24 said, it looks like the Ukrainians are already celebrating the good news from Washington, D.C. So let's take a look at the video and see what we have here. So as you can see, this is the docks right here, and there is something on fire massively in the background. There is some smoke arising from the back, some white smoke, and also a lot of flames. And we'll learn in just a minute that is actually a salvage ship, which is a pretty old and historic and also important salvage ship that Russia uses for their Black Sea Fleet ships. And as you can see here, it's just pretty much a long video of them showing the fire burning in the background. So we're going to go ahead and move on to our next post here, which goes to defense of Ukraine. And in this one right here, it says another bad day for the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Today, the Ukrainian Navy hit the Russian salvage ship Kommuna in temporarily occupied Crimea, and the nature of the damage is being verified. And this was about 6 or 7 hours ago this post was made. And it says, despite being the oldest ship in service with the Russian Black Sea Fleet, the Kommuna is the only rescue vessel of that class on the Black Sea, and its purpose is deep sea work, including raising submarines and also sunken cargo. So here is a picture of the vessel from a bit of a distance. It is a very uniquely designed vessel. I don't know a whole bunch about it, but it is one of the rare types that can actually raise submarines, and it's very unique in its design. So on one hand, it is unfortunate that this somewhat historic vessel was hit, but then again, this is war and we can't get too sentimental about it because Ukraine obviously has to win. But moving on here to our next post, it goes to Nexa, and we are getting confirmation as of about 2 hours ago that that vessel, the Kommuna, has been successfully destroyed in completion, and that vessel will no longer be operating with the Black Sea Fleet. So like I said, another win for Ukraine in the Black Sea, and I guess now the Russians will have to try to take their vessels even farther away than they were before to try to get them out of the line of sight and also the line of fire of those Ukrainian naval vessels. But with that piece of news out of the way, we're moving on to our next one here, which goes to Nexa, and we're learning that long-range ATACMS missiles may be shipped to Ukraine by the end of next week, says Mark Warner, who's the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And he says, I hope that once this gets to the president by Tuesday or Wednesday, he's referring to the bill, by the way, it's when the president must sign off on it, he's hoping that these shipments of ATACMS will be literally launched very soon, by the end of next week. So this sounds very promising, and I think it's pretty much a done deal at this point. Even though the bill has not made its way through the Senate just yet, I think it's pretty much a foregone conclusion it will make it through the Senate, and also the president is obviously going to sign off on it as well because he's been advocating for the aid also. So I think it's pretty much a done deal with the aid going through, and it sounds like ATACMS is going to be one of the first weapons that is sent in mass to Ukraine, and we've seen how effective the ATACMS are on the battlefield, and that is a big deal for Ukraine to get. And this was something that people were hoping they would get a lot quicker than now, but, you know, better late than never, I would say. But moving on to our next post here, we have the next one from Null Reports. And this is a very big article indeed as well, not to be understated whatsoever. It says here the U.S. considers sending about 60 military advisors to Ukraine, says Pentagon spokesman General Patrick Ryder, and that the advisors would not be in a combat role, but would rather advise and support the Ukrainian government and military. So, big deal here is these military advisors will be sent to the embassy in Kyiv. They're not going to be put out on the battlefield according to what we're told by the Pentagon, and also they will not be in a military role. So they'll simply be there to basically give verbal advice on the strategy that Ukraine should use to force the Russians out. Now, the way Russia is going to react to this is probably going to be a pretty big propaganda stunt. I'm sure Russia is going to play this up to try to make it seem like maybe NATO is getting involved militarily when that's not the case. But I'll be interested to see how Russia does react to this piece of news, because in the past, Russia has objected very strongly to this occurring. And even though we already have a few military advisors there right now, sending 60 more, that is certainly a large increase in the amount of advisors that will be inside of Ukrainian territory. But with that, we are moving on to our next post here, which also goes to Nexa. And like we reported about 3 or 4 days ago, the Russians are being pushed out of Nagorno-Karabakh. And now that they're being pushed out, we're learning that Russian quote-unquote peacekeepers, which is a completely inaccurate term, from Nagorno-Karabakh may be transferred to Ukraine. So Russia's going to be transferring the soldiers and also equipment from Nagorno all the way back to Ukraine. And this assumption was made by build expert Julian Ropke, and that the Russian contingent has been in Karabakh since the fall of 2020, and it numbered about 2,000 military personnel. So not a massive amount of soldiers there, but the amount of equipment that was there was actually somewhat surprising. And as you can see in this video, there are a lot of these, I believe, BTRs on this train, which are making their way back to Russia to be redeployed inside of Ukraine. So this will be a new, fresh injection of equipment by the Russian military into Ukraine. So while Ukraine is getting aid, the Russians are trying to scramble aid pretty much from wherever they can to put it back on the battlefield. But anyways, moving on to our next post here, we have another one, this time from Null Reports. And you might all remember that just a few days back as well, we learned that Russia, for the first time ever, lost a Tu-22M3 bomber, which is a long-range strategic bomber, very expensive and also somewhat rare, and Russia lost that a few days ago. It crashed and burned and fell to the ground in a tailspin. We're learning here that the Russian Air Force affiliated channel called Fighter Bomber is reporting that the fourth pilot from the shot-down Tu-22M3 was found, and they said he was in eternal flight, meaning he was basically dead. So they found that fourth pilot dead, and once again, that was a pretty fatal crash that occurred. Not too many people survived that, and the fourth pilot is now confirmed dead. But moving on to our next post here, we have another one from Nexa. And while a lot of us were celebrating yesterday that the aid bill got passed through the US Congress, Moscow was not happy whatsoever, which was to be expected. It says here that Moscow says US aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan will quote-unquote exacerbate global crises. And it also just happens to be that Russia caused the crisis, and now they're concerned about exacerbating it. How ironic is that? Russia says the allocation of U.S. military aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan will exacerbate these crises, said the Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, who's just a very kind lady indeed, just so kind. She's not brutal or mean or vicious whatsoever to innocent civilians. And we also see here that she called on aid for Kyiv, direct support for terrorist activities, and said aid to Taiwan represented interference in China's internal affairs. So this is pretty much the typical Russian propaganda line. Nothing really new here, just had a report on it to let you know what Moscow's reaction was to the aid bill passing, and obviously it's not very good because Moscow doesn't like to hear that, because they were hoping that the West would abandon Ukraine, and that way they could try to steamroll Ukraine in the summer when they try to do this next mobilization that's coming up very soon. But with that, we're moving on to our next post here, which goes to OSINT Technical. And this post shows us footage of a UK supplied ASRAAM SAM system in Ukrainian service engaging a Russian drone. So we do have some video evidence here of a UK supplied system in use by Ukraine, and this system is honestly kind of wild to me, the way this missile goes up and takes a sharp left turn. Let's take a look and see what we have. And here you can see it goes right up and makes a sharp left turn. That is a very unique missile right there, very fast. And it looks like it's very effective as well. That thing is moving so fast, it's probably hard to shoot down. But moving on to our next post here, we have another one from Nexa. And we're getting more news about the floods inside of Russia. And not only are the floods not getting better, they're actually getting worse and they're gaining strength. And in the Tyumen region, the water level in the Ishim River rose by 140 centimeters over the day and reached 10.5 meters. And let's take a look at this video right here and see exactly how bad the flooding really is. And as you can see in this video right here, the flooding is tremendous. This is an aerial view of the area near the Tyumen region. And as you can see, this place is absolutely waterlogged. That water is very high. It's going over all the roadways, and it's covering up some houses in the area as well. And this flooding is not being controlled by Russia whatsoever. There's really not much they can really do at this point, I don't think. But as you can see, it is absolutely disrupting this roadway right here. And this almost looks like some kind of like river or lake or something now. It's not even really dry land, and that flooding is terrible, absolutely terrible, and Russia is really feeling the pain from that, and they're really not sure how to respond to it at this point. But moving on to our next post here, we have one from Nexa once again, and in this one we see that Russia is trying to maximize the intensity of strikes on Ukraine until the arrival of F-16s, says Speaker of the AFU, Yevlash. The AFU also notes that the occupiers will try to hit critical infrastructure and energy as much as possible, and the enemy still has quite a few missiles that are used against Ukraine right after coming off the assembly line. So what we're basically deriving from this statement is Russia is trying to blitz Ukraine before they get aid and also before they get F-16s. So there's a lot of hope in Ukraine's future that they're going to turn this entire war around really quickly and start pushing the Russians out once these F-16s and also aid get to Ukraine. And it may not matter if Russia can mobilize a lot of soldiers in summer whatsoever. It sounds like Ukraine might flip this around very fast, and it could go in their favor. So I'm holding out a lot of hope for them, and it sounds like Zelensky has become very hopeful again once as well, which is good news. But with that, that is actually our last piece of news for the day. And I hope you found this video informative, and if you have, press the like button and also subscribe to the channel as well, because that greatly helps us get the news out there. And also, if you want to support our operation financially, we do have a Patreon page, and we post over there. We're trying to do it about once a week now. We're on our Patreon. If you want to sign up over there, we have a link in the description below for that, and that obviously helps the operation keep running financially, which is a big help, and we appreciate it very much. And once again, thank you all for watching. We'll see you all at 10 p.m. Eastern tonight for our Sunday night fundraiser stream and more nightly news, and bye-bye for now.